Shabbat shalom, everyone. I was almost the cause of a small international incident when I suggested that the plastic plates that we have here at Adat Shalom, the hard plastic plates, could be koshered and used for Passover. Some of you, I like, forgive me for arrogating to myself the idea that I know the Jews. So some people are like, what's the problem here? And others are like, use the same plates for Passover? Is he even a rabbi? If you know me, you know that I can't resist delving into a question like this, because keeping kosher for Passover is one of those things about which people actually either fanatically dedicate themselves to it or don't do it all, but nobody ever explains why and what the point is. And that kind of a topic I can't resist. Because obviously something that has such gravity, right, has such catchingness and takes up so much time and energy in the Jewish world, about which people have such strong feelings, and yet nobody sort of speaks to the depth of what it is that's trying to do. That's where my heart always goes. I want to go to the why and to the wherefore, not just as a sociological experiment, but as a way of understanding what the spirituality of this holiday and this thing exactly is. What does it mean to say that on Pesach we're seeking freedom? And the way that we're going to do that is by obsessively cleaning our houses, right? Or yelling at our spouses for not helping us clean our houses, or yelling at our spouses because they're being crazy about cleaning the houses, or fighting amongst our families because the dish that you brought wasn't kosher enough, but also who cares? And so what's amazing to me is, that we have a huge, if you don't mind me saying, blind spot about this. It's something that we do all the time, and we don't know why we do it. And so that for me is the sweetest stuff. And what I'll say is that classically, the reason given for us eating matzah on Pesach as opposed to chametz, does anyone know? If so, go ahead, raise your hand, and I'll repeat what you say. Anybody know why matzah? Yeah, Steve?
Well, when I grew up, it was because we were rushing out of Egypt and didn't have time to let the bread rise.
Yes, that's right. That is actually the stated reason in the Torah. And then there's sort of an additional spiritual reason why you want matzah on Passover as opposed to bread. And because bread is gas ruach, it's full of hot air. And matzah is dense and essential and to the point. This is a beautiful teaching, and one that rabbis in particular should be aware of. You'll let me know how I do with it. And yet it also seems in certain ways to miss the point, because it's one thing, right, not to eat bread and to eat matzah for a week, and another thing entirely to rid your entire house from even a crumb of yeast, which, by the way, drives the brain to a kind of strange OCD extreme. I know it, I feel it, something like that. For those who care to know, by the way, yeast is literally floating in the air in every given moment, so the task is impossible, which for some people makes them want to work even harder at it, And so I think that there's something going on with kashrut, with keeping kosher for Pesach, that actually is speaking deeply to what it means to be a human being, something about the way that we're constructed as humans that I want to pay attention to. Because the idea of controlling what we eat and what goes into our bodies is something that people spend thousands and billions and billions and billions of dollars on, and actually argue quite a bit. My father, by the way, Alav Shalom, was one of these people. He was a person who definitely believed, he was a psychiatrist, and he was a psychiatrist of the age that he definitely believed in better living through chemistry. The pills that were invented in his lifetime saved people's lives. And so my dad was possessed of the idea that really what you could do is that you could construct your life through what you put in your body. And we used to play a game in our house, make a meal that dad will eat. Because, at a certain point in time, he was one of those people who had gone to sort of protein shakes and bone broth and this, that, and the other thing, and, meal prepping and so on and so forth. And some of you may know those people. And some of those may be those people. And if you're related to those people, you have my condolences in advance because, I know what it's like. So we would literally have this game in which we would try to make a meal that our father would eat. And in general, even though he desperately wanted to, he wouldn't do it because he was trying to construct his reality through what he put in his body. He would read books. Andrew Weil, some of the other wellness people, right? Books about cancer, books about longevity, in which what he was trying to do is he was trying to sort of harness himself as a human being in many ways, I think, to raise himself up above the fallibility of humanity, which is, he said, he wanted to control what his body was. And the question is, on some level, can you do it? Now, what I'll say is that this does tie into the Pesach story in a very interesting way, right? Because when we're talking about slavery, the kind of slavery that was experienced there, right? We weren't speaking of chattel slavery the way that we understand it in the United States. We were speaking of a kind of a tax slavery and a class slavery and also a mental slavery. And, slavery also exists in the sense of, do you have the freedom not to belong to the group and setting to which you were born into? Now, what's interesting is that gets flipped on its head in the Passover story, right? The idea that the children of Israel sort of take the blood of the lamb and they paint it on the doorpost, the lintels of their house, which is probably the idea of where we get the mezuzah from. And I have some questions if the original mezuzah wasn't a box that you put on your house, but rather you literally wrote the words of the Shema. You carved them into the doorposts of your house. I wonder about it. Maybe somebody can figure out the answer for me, because you're all good researchers. But one of the things that I think is happening there is that the Israelites are sort of flipping that on their head and saying, unless you belong to this slave class, you won't be redeemed. And I wonder, what if there was an Egyptian who said, no, I want to identify with you. I want to be part of you. I want to change the construction of my identity to be part of you. Would it have worked for them to be able to put blood over their lintel and to be saved? I hope it would, but I don't know the answer. Really, at the heart of Pesach and the idea that people are going to spend dozens of hours of their time ridding their house and buying cakes that really no one should eat, even under the conditions of nuclear war. Right. Is this very strange question of how much can you really control your reality? How much can you construct, literally, the physical building blocks of your body? Can you rid yourself of chametz even for a week, right? And the answer, of course, is both yes and no in a maddening way that we all sort of understand as human beings, in which we actually have tremendous control over our lives and strangely none at all at the same time. You know what I mean? Does that hit for you? It hits for me. And so what's happening during Pesach is a way of trying to sort of like almost ascend beyond ourselves. I can be free of something very basic. And the question is always, does it work? I think, though, that in this process, by the way, one of the things you see quite easily is how all of this teaching goes astray quite quickly. Right? From the people who won't eat things unless it's made with kosher for Passover salt, or wash things if it's made with kosher for Passover soap, which is a thing out there in the world. And from the people who are like, this is absolutely nonsense, except, of course, for when I eat my antioxidants to keep cancer, to keep the cancer at bay. Right? Which is to say, on the one hand, is a kind of obsessiveness about what this means to cover every single surface of your house in tinfoil. And the other, I think, is, I don't want to call it hypocrisy, but a bit of blindness to the fact that actually we each have a lot of koshering for Pesach in us. It just tends to come out sort of in its own cultural way, in its own individual way, in its own familial way, in which, yes, actually, you will do kind of nuts things in order to speak to yourself about the kind of person that you want to be in this world and how much control you actually have over your own body. I'll tell you, as it always is for me, I never really felt it until I rediscovered it for myself. And years ago, I decided that what I was going to do, and I'm not recommending this to you as a method, but more as a way of investigating what really matters, is that almost without exception, there are no kosher for Passover items in my house that have been labeled kosher for Passover items in my house, and my house is kosher for Passover. Because what I wanted to do was to re-explore what it was like for our ancestors, right? To sort of get back to the root of things, to the source of things, is to see if I could feel for myself the original fire, the heat of what it was to say, actually, we're free from the first time, and for the first time we get to control what we put in our bodies for a week, you know? And so, like, the only stuff that's really kosher for Passover is the meat or the chicken that I end up eating, or sometimes I'll get like one of those like super eco-kosher, grass-fed, spend your child's entire college fund on like the rack of the rack of ribs that I'm going to put into the oven. But other than that, what I've actually done is sort of like, because people out there are invested in these kinds of things, is looked for products that are naturally kosher, and therefore for a week I actually feel great. Because somehow I feel like I am tying myself into what it was like back in the beginning. But that's for me. And the blessing that I want to give you for Passover, for this Passover and for Passovers to come, and it's beyond the Seder, if you are the kind of person who invests in having a kosher for Passover house, a sort of kosher for Passover house, a kosher Passover for house for 3 days until you break and get pizza, like everybody has their own version of this, right? Is that what I want you to try to do, or what I want to suggest that you try to do, really with all humility, is that you recover some of the fire from the beginning. Right? Because you have to understand that keeping kosher for Pesach is a way of both capturing freedom and, I don't exactly know how to say it, but the idea that we can both be free and do exactly what's expected of us at the same time. We can be free by fulfilling expectations. And if you don't resonate with that, just think about what profession you went into and how your parents felt about it when you were doing it. And you'll understand the sort of tug, or the push and pull of what it means to sort of want both to be completely independent and to want to fulfill what other people expect of you at the same time. Right? Kosher for Passover, being kosher for Passover is like diverging widely from the world by doing exactly everything that our ancestors ever did. And that's a fascinating ideal. So for you, what I hope that you have is this sense that, how exactly can I put it? That you both embrace your freedom and your lack of it at the same time. That you find a way of saying, yes, it is possible to live differently for a whole week. I don't actually have to have chametz in my life for a whole week. And yet, I still can't quite escape myself. Shabbat shalom.